Shalom, Kahala Yahweh, Bashem Yahushai, Bashem Rapakadash. Double honors to my teachers, the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and mercy to the elect for the house of David, reborn again in this generation. And Shalom to the 130 Yasharallah, who today are known as the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Indians, who before losing their true heritage were known as the Israelites of the Holy Bible. In today's lesson, we're going to read this small posting about this so-called black man that got posted by the Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks Instagram page, right? Because, you know, the whole Juneteenth month and all that crap going on right now, a lot of organizations are posting stories about Israelites who are known as African Americans here in Babylon the Great. Well, the brother Naquam posted this Instagram post in the chat room, and I just thought it was just such a striking similarity to a story in the Bible, right? Namely, talking about Cornelius, the Roman centurion soldier, right, who also was a so-called black man, right? And we're going to go ahead and prove it in just a bit, even though it's been proven time and time again down to the scriptures that Cornelius was a so-called black man, right? And he was not an Edomite, right? But before we get into that, let's just read this Judite's story, so that way you could get a bit of understanding. So it reads here. It says, on Juneteenth, we honor Colonel Charles Young, the first black superintendent of any national park. Charles Young was the first child of Gabriel and Armintia Young, who were enslaved African Americans residing in Kentucky. Now again, they weren't African Americans, they were enslaved Israelites of the tribe of Judah. But these people don't know. Charles was born into slavery. You hear that? He was born into slavery on the March 12th, 1864. He would go on to have an illustrious military career despite virulent racism and discrimination. Now, notice it says here, military career, right? He was the third black graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point and the first to achieve the ranks of captain, major, lieutenant, colonel, and colonel at the regular army. In 1903, Colonel Charles Young became our superintendent, leading the development of the General's Highway into the giant forest and opening access to the park's famed giant sequoias. To learn more about him, visit, and it goes on. But you see that, people? You had an enslaved Israelite, right? A child who managed in his life to climb to these heights, right? To be in this position of power in the empire of the Edomites, man. Right? And it's right here in front of you. Now, let's go ahead and read the story of Cornelius. Again, another Israelite who came out of the slavery of the nation of Israel. Because you see, by the time the Messiah came on to the scene, and this is after the Messiah had been crucified and ascended into the heavens in a UFO, that is, you had the apostles, right? In this case, it was Peter, who was King David in the reincarnation, who the story reflects upon, man. And this was about about a few years after the Messiah had left. Now, you got to understand that at this time, the Roman Empire had control over Jerusalem. And before that, it was the Greeks, right? Same people, but different nations. Now, this Israelite, this so-called black man, Cornelius, as being a slave, under the Greeks and eventually the Romans, he eventually joined the Roman army. And in the Roman army, he eventually came up, and he became a centurion of the band called the Italian Band, right? And he became very prominent amongst the Roman army, right? But because America and the world, for the most part, has been inundated with white, Caucasian, supremacist propaganda, when you say Roman soldier, you think of the so-called white man, right? In that whole Italian or that whole Roman regalia, man, right? You couldn't bear to think of this, right? This is, a lot of people cannot see a Roman soldier as a black man, but it happened, right? It was very common for the Roman Empire to bring in the captives of its conquests of other nations in as slaves at first, and then eventually they would rise up to the ranks. You know, you'd have the people who would come in as slaves, and then eventually they would have children within the Roman Empire, and those children would grow up as Romans, right? And they would be part of the Roman Empire system, man. And that's who Cornelius was. So let's go and read this. This is Acts 10:1. There was a certain man of Caesarea called Cornelius. And by the way, the Greek word there, Cornelius, goes back to the word kernel, which is ultimately like seed, right? So that just shows you, man, that it's a spiritual message, man. A centurion of the band called the Italian Band, a devout man. Notice that. Remember that. A devout man. And one that feared God, right? He feared God. That's another thing to note. With all his house, right? And this is everybody under his house. That was the same way, man. You're not going to have a so-called Caucasian have these traits. Which gave much alms to the people and prayed to God always. You see, another trait. Pray to God always. These Edomites, they do not fit these traits. He saw a vision, evidently about the 9th hour of the day. So that would have been about 1 o'clock in the morning, right? Because remember, the Hebrew days started at 6 p.m. Right? So and it tells you here, it says, an angel of God coming into him and saying unto him, Cornelius. And when he looked on him, he was afraid and said, What is it, Lord? And he said unto him, Thy prayers and thine alms are come up for a memorial before God. And now send men to Joppa and call for one Simon, whose surname is Peter. Right? So let's go ahead and skip down, because you see the Lord sent a messenger onto him, man. Now that's another point I want you to remember, man. The Lord literally sent an angel to this man to give him a message, to tell him to go and hear the words of Peter. Right? But let's continue. This is Acts 10:22. And they said, Cornelius, the centurion, a just man. There you go. A just man. Right? And one that feareth God and of good report among all the nation of the Jews. Right? Who is, what, you know, this just shows you another thing, right? Why would the so-called Jews, or why would the Jews, you know, have a good report about an Edomite? They wouldn't, right? That's not what they would do. Was warned from God by a holy angel to send for thee into his house and to hear words of thee, right? And so that shows you, man. So see, so this man, Cornelius, he had to be an Israelite, man. And why is that? Because it tells you here too. Because this is the only precept I'm going to use, because this is all you really ever gotta know about, man. This is Psalms 147:19. He showeth his word unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgments unto Israel. Jacob being the same thing as Israel, man. This meaning the Negros, Latinos, Native Indians, right? He hath not dealt so with any nation. And as for his judgments, they have not known them. Praise ye Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushai. So come on, people. See, the Bible interprets itself. You just got to know where to look, and you can't let these devils' propaganda fool you, right? And if you don't believe me, let's hear it out of one of these so-called, these so-called Caucasians' own words, man. It tells you here. It says, black Roman soldiers in Britain were under the rule of Septimius Severus, a black Roman emperor based in York, right? So you see, it's right here, people. Let's read it. It says, early black British people in Britain of African descent generally refer to themselves as black British. This includes people from former British colonies in Africa and Afro-Caribbean. However, Africans appeared in Britain long before the British colonized Africa. The first blacks in Britain arrived as soldiers in the Roman armies in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. All right? Now, when they say 2nd and 3rd century, that's talking about 100 AD to around 200 AD, right? And why is that? Let's go and take a look at the Bible timeline. All right? So we go here. Now, let's take a look at Septimius Severus. When did Septimius Severus, which by the way, his name means cutter down of the 7, right? Septimius Severus, right? Septimius means 7. The Severus means like the severer of the 7, right? Because he basically cut down those 7 past emperors, or the Roman emperors, who were basically white people, right? Well, look at around the time when he was born, before he became in power, this happened in 193 AD, which is just on the cusp of the what is it, the 2nd century. This guy was in the Roman army coming up, just like Cornelius, right? Now this took place about almost 150 years after Cornelius, but look at that, man. Cornelius was one of the first soldiers who came into the Roman army, right? And one of the first people who, or the first Judites, the so-called black person who became emperor, was Nerva, who was in 96 AD, and that right there was about 50 years after Cornelius, man. So you see, so that just shows you that the so-called black man has been a big part of the Roman Empire. And why is that? Because the Israelites of the Bible, right? The Southern Kingdom, they would be the so-called Negroes of today, right? And that's one of the biggest mysteries of the Bible, which the world is starting to wake up to, man. And a lot of people are afraid of that. And why is that? Because they've been treating the so-called black man as nothing, and they're starting to realize that they all this time have been believing that the wrong people, those so-called Amalekites over in Israel, they've been thinking that they were the real Jews, man. Not realizing that they converted to Judaism in 740 AD, right? Which is revealed in their own papers, their own documents, in the Schechter letters that are stored over in Cambridge University. I think it's Cambridge, right? Well, so I just wanted to touch upon that. I came across that Instagram article, and I thought it was a beautiful example. So, till the next time, I want to give all praises to Yahweh, B'Hashem Yahushai, B'Hashem Rukak Wardash. Double honors to my teachers, the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and mercy to the elect. Shalom.